Good afternoon. My name's Winn. I work in the UK at the University of Lincoln. Work in the Centre for Educational Research and Development Resources. Centre for Educational Research and Development. This is Dr. Richard Hall, who is a reader in Education and Technology at De Montfort University, Leicester, in the UK. Like every other presenter, we've written a paper and we hope that you will read it. We're not going to kind of pour through the paper or in this session. We just want to, in a way, tell stories of why we're here talking to you and perhaps raise some questions that we'll have a few minutes to talk about at the end of our session. So this conference, the theme of this conference is Impact and Sustainability of OER. For the last year or so, Richard and I, although at different universities, have been in close contact thinking about the notion of sustainability and resilience in higher education. In particular, we've been trying to look at the very big picture, not, the sustainability of a particular course, or we've been thinking about sustainability on the kind of global grand scale. This was just prior to Copenhagen, where the world met to see if we could sustain our future through a reduction of emissions and all that kind of thing. And so we've looked really quite closely at some of the sustainability questions, things like climate change, things like the use of fossil fuels, production of energy. We're both working in the field of educational technology, and we were interested in, what powers educational technology. Where are we drawing this power from? What are the implications involved? We wanted to really understand where our ideas about education stood in the world. And so we looked at the term resilience, which has been used more and more now. I don't know about it in other countries, but in the UK they're using it in political arenas. And it's often used, it's often a bastardized form of how it's originally used. In the ecological sciences, resilience, as some of you may know, is about adaptation and change fundamentally. But resilience is often used in politics as preservation. It's talking about it's the shields up. How can we be resilient to the impacts of things around us? But we were interested in resilience in terms of change, trying to go back to the kind of original ecological sciences use of it. And so both of us have an interest in open education. We think there are possibilities in what is offered and what we're all discussing. And so we wanted to think about how open education can change us and therefore change the world into one that is sustainable and can sustain this new form of teaching and learning that we're all talking about. When I think of sustainability of OER or open education, I first think about how do we sustain the world, which sustains our institutions, which sustains OER. Sustainability of OER is not just about creating new business models in an unsustainable world. So the sustainability of OER, from my perspective, and I think Richard's, is that we need to think about sustainability on a much bigger scale and how open education can contribute towards that. And frankly, most of you will be aware of the kind of long-term challenges, to put it lightly, that we face in the world. And actually, we don't want to sustain what we currently do. What we currently do is not sustainable, and we don't want to sustain it. We want to do something different. We want something new that can be sustained, that has longevity. And frankly, very little has longevity at the moment. So the other thing that I think about quite often is education and the transformational effect education has. And we're often keen to talk about the positive attributes of education and the transformation that it can have of people's lives. But we neglect to think about the devastating consequences of education. The fact is, you know, the world, we're not facing the challenges we face because of some external force. It's our own problem. It's problems we've created. It's problems that education has created. We're producing the maniacs in business. We're producing the bankers, the politicians. Education is transforming people into monsters and society into an unsustainable society. It's quite a blunt way of putting it, but I think it's important that we think about the devastating effects of our current educational system. Again, how can open education, how can this new form of education that we're all so interested in and keen on promoting, how can it create different types of people? How can it change us? How can it make us more resilient? I think I've just covered most of the questions and problems that I'm kind of giving myself. I don't actually have any answers. You know, we talk about things in our paper, we provide a few examples, we talk about how technology, you know, we're all aware of the positive impacts of technology, the way it helps us communicate, it makes our lives perhaps more flexible. We cover all that in the paper, but really I just wanted to put a few points to you about sustainability, about change, about the role of education, the devastating impacts of education, and perhaps we can think about how open education can be a positive force for change in an unsustainable world at present.
Hello. That was the upbeat section. I have one caveat, and I have 6 points that I'd like to make. And those 6 points are going to be about critique, about transformation, about sustainability, about hope. I see hope as being very important, although we disagree on that. About cracks, I want to talk about cracks, and I want to talk about openness, and I'm going to try and make those relatively quickly. The caveat is that I noticed about 25 minutes ago that we're in the policy and strategy section. So I've been thinking, well, how does this relate to my role at De Montfort University in Leicester, in the Midlands, in England, a university that's centred very much in its locale and tries to engage with a deprived area of the country, really, with low levels of kind of GDP. And my role is as effectively as the lead, the academic lead for technology-enhanced learning. So I have to engage with senior management. I have to engage with those who are driving the core business of the institution forward. But within that, I think the values and the way in which I look at the world has to come through. So I have to live that thing. And kind of moving on from the two presentations that we saw earlier, I have to kind of live this in terms of policy and strategy. And that, I guess that's important to me because it's about the transformatory potential. Transformation is very important to both Joss and me. So the transformatory potential of education, and as a subset of that, technology. So technology is not driving this thing. It is a secondary thing. And OERs are, at best, a tertiary thing for us, I think. Within this, I think the second half of my caveat is that one of the roles that I previously had was or is, I am an historian. It's okay to say that, isn't it? I am an historian. I was a historian. Looking at the way in which the radical potential of education has enabled us to change people's lives, and looking at the past, for me, is critical in understanding not just about progress, whatever that is, and I think it's up for grabs, but what it is to be progressive and what it is to offer opportunity and hope moving forward. And I think sometimes we forget about the past in our desperate rush for the shiny and the new and the current and the novel. So that's my caveat. That's what I'm trying to do within the institution. On the 6 points that I have that I'd like to make, the first is on critique. I see open education very much as a critique of the current forms, the current social forms of higher education that we have. This is really important in the UK at the moment, where we're under attack from the current coalition government. I see open education as having radical moments for transformation of our experience, and it's open education I'm interested in. However, I do fear that through open educational resources and our obsession with open educational resources, and to an extent our fetishization of open educational resources, we're at risk of seeing our work subsumed or assimilated within business as usual. This, for me, is particularly important in terms of the second point I'd like to make, which is about transformation. As Joss has articulated, I think both of us see us as being entrenched, mired, subsumed within crisis. This is a crisis whose symptoms are around climate change. They're also a crisis whose symptoms are being visited upon us in terms of peak oil, resource availability, our access to rare earth metals, that kind of thing. However, at a deeper level, this is a crisis of political economy. And I think quite a lot in this way around Naomi Klein's work, the idea that she has around the shock doctrine in particular, and the ways in which global capital attempts to perpetuate itself in terms of business as usual by using crisis to defend its own hegemonic, its own dominant position, to reinvent itself effectively, to remarketise, to reprivatise the work that we do and our labour. So I'm interested in open education as a transformatory potential to move us away from that. So I move on to sustainability, my third point. So I'm interested here in kind of business as usual, really, and the way in which that has, I think, assimilated in terms of the discourses we have, in terms of the conversations we have, the way it's assimilated issues around impact, around sustainability, and around resilience, one of the points that Joss made, and that it's turned these into kind of radically conservative moments rather than radically progressive moments. And I think our discussion sometimes of open educational resources hides movements of struggle, so that we learn to adapt. We learn to adapt to change rather than seeing that actually change is being visited upon us and we need to do something radically different. Business as usual is not an option. And I think this is one of the key points for me. Is the status quo an option? And I'm not sure it is. So I see hope. Hope is a big thing for me. We're halfway there. Hope is a big thing for me. Hope in that higher education, in that the social forms of higher education, in open education and the work we do around open education, might enable us to recast our engagement with our students, our engagements with our lecturers, in terms of their development of resilience, of resilient characteristics, of sustainable characteristics moving forward. And that might be accredited in any number of ways. But in this, I see a real place for radical critical pedagogy. And our thinking about open education, our thinking about open educational resources in terms of radical pedagogies of student as producer, which we heard about from the University of Utopia this morning, thinking about the way in which students and staff recast their experiences, thinking about pedagogies of excess and the way in which we can think about the distribution of the wealth we create, and thinking about pedagogies of hope in driving our activities. So my penultimate point is about cracks. I'm quite taken by the work of John Holloway. In his thinking around the cracks in hegemonic positions, the cracks in coercive capitalism, and how we might look at those cracks to try to recast the world. For me, I see open education as a crack in the current social forms of higher education. I see it as a crack in business as usual. And this is particularly important because we're dealing with crisis. We're dealing with serious global crisis. And I think we need to look at the ways in which we use open education to transform our approaches. And I want us to see ourselves. I want us to try to engage with our learners. I want us to try and engage with our lecturers, because we're in the crisis and we are the crisis. As Joss said, we're complicit in this. So for me, it's about transformation again. So my final point is about openness and what openness means for me, because this is my story and it might not be yours, but it's mine, in terms of how I begin to try to move myself and hopefully engage in dialogue. One of the things that Virginie made, one of the points that she made there was very much around the dialogic nature of the work that she's engaged with. And for me, it's about theory and practice. It's about open education. It's about open activity. It's about open production. It's about open curriculum. It's about open networks as a form of dialogue, really, where open educational resources are only ever secondary. They're only ever a secondary thing for me, at best. And really, I'm interested in this because we need to develop, I think, transformatory approaches to dealing with crisis. And in this, I hope we can develop resilient or sustainable characteristics. So I'm thinking more and more about the kind of the radical history of education and about the things that reveals about us and our development. And in particular, I'm thinking perhaps in terms of my role as a historian about cooperative engagements in the past. I'm thinking about the cooperative college within the work that they're doing currently within the UK. I'm thinking about the work over the course of the past century of the National Institute for Adult and Continuing Education, the Workers' Education Association. I'm thinking about the work that's gone on in Cuba since the revolution, but also since the collapse of the Soviet Union. I'm thinking about community education projects like Trapeze and like the Autonomous Geographies Collective, which are very much about participatory action research in the quest really to reclaim open education and to reclaim our academic practice as really as a radical moment of struggle. And that's what I'm interested in terms of my context within the institution, my work on policy and strategy, really, to try and transform, in the hope that we can transform our experience, really, in the face of crisis. So that's me.
Hi, guys. Thank you very much for that. I've been coming to this conference for a few years, and I have a sense that people resist what it was a theoretical, largely theoretical talk. But the thing I love about both of you is that I know that you are trying to embody and live in your own lives and your own work these ideals. And so I would just offer you the opportunity and ask you one question of, what is the thing you are most proudest of that you're currently doing that tries to exemplify this shift and this turn that you're looking to bring about? Because I know you are doing them, and I'd like these people to hear.
I, together with colleagues in the Centre for Educational Research and Development, I'm interested in establishing cooperative centres for education, for higher education. So alternatives to the university that provide university-level education, modelled on the anarchist social centre movement that has proliferated around the UK and possibly elsewhere. We've only really just started looking at it, and we're having conversations with the cooperative movement and the social centre movement in the UK. But that is the project at the moment that excites me the most and seems like it has the most sustainable potential. But who knows? You know, we're grasping at straws like most people, I think.
I think the stuff I'm proudest of does not take place within the institution. I think the things for me that recently have kind of emerged are my ability to use social media around social protests. So you know that I was on the streets a few weeks ago as part of a Unite Against Fascism demonstration when the English Defence League were on the streets of Leicester, where I live. And it was very important to me that I was using social media to engage with other activists on the ground to try and map that, really. But not only with other activists on the ground to try and map that, but with members of the English Defence League and with fascists to try to engage in an open discussion with them about the common issues that we're facing. Because for them, the issues are around immigration. For them, the issues are around access to resources. For them, the issues are around education and the disenfranchisement of white working-class men in particular. And there's some football hooligans thrown in there as well. But it's important that we are openly engaging with those people, because those people are in this world too. So for me, it's about that stuff, and then actually within that, how do we take that practice which is about engaging with other voices, and how do I bring that back into the university? And that's very important to me.
Okay, thank you. Very inspirational. I like what you said very much, and it resonates with some of the work I've been doing. I've been teaching media ethics for a couple of years, and essentially, I feel like what you were saying is that we need to have an ethical stance. And the elephant in the room is global warming and peak oil. These are big problems, and so I guess I have more of a comment than a question. But it seems to me that what I like about what you're saying is that you are going forward, embracing the possibility of these new tools, but at the same time maintaining a critical edge of the technology, and also having a relationship with the past, such as I assume Ivan Illich is part of your thought process, and Small is Beautiful, sort of different, like, appropriate technology critiques from the 70s. And let's not forget these. And so I just want to say thank you and acknowledge how important ethics is. And I was waiting for someone to say this, and you have, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you said it. I didn't say ethics, but thank you.
You know, we won't take much longer, but the critical point for me, when you start reading about sustainability, global sustainability, there is no evidence whatsoever that a growth-based economy can reduce its energy consumption and emissions output. There's no evidence. Yet, wherever we are at the moment, we hear that we need more growth, more growth. And some of the clearest voices and some of the most sane research I came across was against growth. It was saying we don't need any more growth. Growth is killing us. This whole obsession with growth is killing us. And so it was at that point where I stopped actually thinking about resilience in terms of protecting what we have, and started thinking about resilience in terms of changing what we have. And you know, I can't impress you upon you enough, really, to challenge the idea that growth will save us. You know, that we can grow our way out of the problem. It's nonsense. And I challenge anyone to send me some research that can demonstrate otherwise. It's astonishing when you start looking at this area, how deluded the whole growth obsession is in the world. It's remarkable.
Hi. So I'll begin with explaining my bias, which is that I'm a librarian.
I'm an archivist.
And, well, so then this will be interesting. This is coming back a bit to the conversation earlier, rejecting the commodification of OER and sort of rejecting OER in general. And I'm wondering, as far as I can tell, there is no scholarship, there is no education, there is no learning without access to the past, without access to all of the knowledge that was generated before. And that's embedded in resources. So you speak about open education, open teaching, open learning, open curriculum. Mm-hmm. How can you have those things without resources?
Yeah. The critique I'm trying to work through is the commodification of the resources, and the commodification in the political economic kind of terms. And of course, I'm not against sharing teaching and learning materials. You know, I would encourage it as much as anyone else in this room. It's vital that we share what we know and we teach and learn from each other. But it's the this kind of institutionalization of sharing, effectively. It's the kind of constantly seeking new forms of funding to get people to do what actually we can do quite naturally and normally. And you don't need to pump money into it. You need to talk to people, and you need to explain to them why this can't go, you know, why, you know, the problems with education. and why sharing might actually help resolve some of those problems. You know, it's not going to save the world, but it's what we can do as working in education. So certainly not against open educational resources. I suppose I'm against the institutionalisation of sharing.
I think for me it's very much about production, I suppose. It's about production, not rather than consumption. We were having a discussion earlier over coffee with Mike, and it was this focus on consumption, which I see as a function of coercive capitalism, in part, but I see that as a denigration of myself. Consumption is very important, but production is critical. So the production process and the roles that we have, the ways in which we share those roles and we generate new stuff and work together to generate new relationships. And in that, you're dead right. I'm based in the Department of Library Services. I love my work there. And those artefacts are hugely important. But when those artefacts become an end in themselves and for consumption and of consumption, I think I have issues. We need to unpack them. I think we need to unpack them in ethical terms, in terms of what they mean for our relationships and our roles, what they mean about kind of value, in particular about value, I think, and our values, our shared values.